So Giovanni, we have always been in these ongoing like run-on conversations about all the things. And so I'm just grateful that you are willing to have this version of the conversation with me as an official part of my Decolonizing Work series. Super grateful because you have some sexy definitions and things that I want everybody to hear. But so anyway, welcome. Thank you. My first question for everybody in the series has always been, why are you having this conversation with me? Like, why would you agree to decolonizing work as a conversation with Faith Clark?
Yeah. You know, you said something the last time we spoke that you were doing decolonizing work so that your children could have a safe place to work.
Yeah.
And that really, I mean, it's the exact reason that I do decolonizing work, so that my Black male child can walk through the world safely and eat Skittles and wear a hoodie without the fear of losing his life.
Yep.
It's literally that simple. I'm sure I have 10 other reasons, but that is the big one.
The very first time my son described being profiled, he didn't even know, but he was, being followed around in a store. And then I realized he was being followed around in the store when he described what happened to me. And I realized I was, 50 miles away. I was like, I can't describe that feeling of, oh my goodness. It's starting, so yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yep. So, I think for me, decolonizing work is about creating more inclusion and belonging in the workplace and in the work that we do. But I realize that it's important to say decolonizing just in the same way it's important to say anti-racist, because I think we need to be conscious of the forces that stop us from being inclusive in the workplace and stop us from having meaningful work experiences for my Black boy and my Black adult autistic boy and my daughter with varying neurodivergence, right? So there are forces that make this hard, and I think we need to be conscious of them and stare them in the face. And so this is part of the reason I'm hosting these conversations. So what does decolonizing work mean to you when you think about like what you understand about colonization and decolonization and just the way it has tentacled our existence?
So, I mean, I've been writing a lot about decolonization and talking about it for a long time, even before I was calling it decolonization. And I think, like you said, it was—
Stop. We didn't do any introductions, and you don't have to introduce yourself. You're gonna have, I'm gonna put stuff in the notes and stuff, but just like, who are you? Because you who've been writing, who are you that you can write? Any human can write, absolutely. But who are you?
That's hilarious. My name is Dr. Giavanni Washington, and I am your Black Goddess Guide. I help women harvest the wisdom in their ancestral lineages so that they can curate legacies of healing. That is the work that I'm doing. And who am I to write? I was writing about, in my dissertation work, I was writing about how diasporic communities mediate the trauma of slavery through drumming and dancing, through communal processes.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I ever used the word decolonization in that dissertation. I don't even think it says white supremacy. I'm gonna have to do a search and see what's happening there. But I was certainly very acutely aware of, just from my own process of growing up and being, in Los Angeles, where there's only 8% of the population is Black. I never really felt like my family is Black, and my family was relatively large, so there were lots of Black people around. But in my educational experiences, I was one of the few Black folks in my classes, if not the only one sometimes. And so, just being acutely aware of the difference of how history is taught, and how even from then, I would call it the wound, like Black people or Black history is taught as, I want some like really sexy way to say this, but it's taught as that it is a, hold on, I'm gonna say it, it's that it is a way of being and not a condition that people were put in.
Yeah.
Right. Like slavery is a condition. It's not a status. Like it's not, people aren't born slaves. People don't have slave mentalities. They are put into that situation. And just the whole way we talk about Black history, or that part of American history. And there was certainly nothing pre-colonial taught, right? I didn't know about pre-colonial anything at all. It was always that Black people were lesser, Black people were unhuman, Black people were, denigrated, the Black body was denigrated. So there's just, I talked a lot about the Black body in my dissertation, but not about, that's so interesting that I don't know when I came into that, the awareness of decolonization as an approach to life.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But I think I've certainly been on that side, even if I didn't have a word for it.
For sure.
And I recently, like in my writing about reparations and the invitation that I'm making to people to come in, and to white folks in particular, to come in and support the work that I'm doing financially, I realized that decolonization is a healing process. I think there are lots of definitions, but the one that I'm sort of growing into is that it's a decolonization, it's a process of healing the ruptures that are created by dominant or colonial ways of knowing and being.
Yeah.
And so I think this looks like a return to the old ways, a return to the mysteries, a return to the comfort of beginner's mind, which I think, maybe it's not so comfortable, but beginner's mind, the innocence of beginner's mind, and really the wonder and the willingness to not know things, and also a right relationship with Mother Earth. Because, and I don't know that people really make this connection all the time, the same mind that ravaged and, committed genocide against the native populations of the Americas is the same mind that decided that, these Black bodies can come in now and they can work the land that we have stolen and blooded, it's the same mind. It's all the same mind. So a return to the right relationship with Mother Earth, I think, is actually really critical in this process of decolonization.
There's something extractive. I mean, it's violent, it's extractive, it's violence against bodies and violence against, I'm trying to find a different word than resources. Even shifting language is hard because the words you have are the words you have, but like seeing the earth as something to be extracted from.
Yeah.
Is similar to seeing humans as entities to be extracted from, and perhaps providing some kind of exchange for what you've extracted, whether you do or you don't, but feeling like it's okay to extract and then say, here, I'll give you, this is the token. Putting a numeric value on what we extract feels it's so, violent.
Yeah.
So how in this idea of decolonizing work, what are some of the things that you think we would need to be paying attention to when we think about decolonizing work? And let me ground myself in Afro-Caribbean immigrant woman, mother of neuro-distinct children. And so I know that I approach it from this kind of integration of all these identities, which might be different from yours, or even every conversation I've had has been grounded in a different sense of reality. What do you think we need to be paying attention to if we're decolonizing work?
Decolonizing work. That is so interesting. I will take it to my child right now, who is, I guess I haven't really ever said this, but I guess he's neurodivergent. He is incredibly kinesthetic. And needs to move his need to move his body far outpaces literally anybody that we know.
Okay.
Anybody that we know. And my mother says it's because he was a preemie and he wasn't fully baked or whatever. But he's a sensory seeker. He's a risk taker. He was climbing things and jumping off things, like, oh my God, he's on top of the house, and he's 3. Like, why, and he's fine, and he never hurt himself anyway. So he's having a really tough time in middle school. In elementary school, they had flexible seating, and I feel like it was just more a loving environment in general, and they were patient, they were kind and understanding. And in middle school, there's a lot less patience. There's the expectations are a little higher, especially after COVID. I think the transition from basically 4th grade to 6th grade was a big jump, and he's really struggling. And also, because they've moved all of the things online during COVID, a lot of those policies have stayed, our practices have stayed. So a lot of learning is 2D. And if you're a kinesthetic kid, you need to move your body, and you need to touch things. So anytime there's a project where he's building something, he's winning. You're like, he's winning, right? I feel like, so I guess what I'm getting at is we need to actually address that there are different styles of learning and different styles of taking in information and then expressing information. So I would say that, workplaces tend to have systems that are, I don't know what the word is. There's like one way to do things.
Yeah.
right? And I think we need multiple ways to do things so that everybody has a chance to win and show their, I'm clear that he's in a system that's not built for him.
Right.
Right. And he's struggling and it's painful. He's suffering. Yeah. Right. And so to be in a place in my entrepreneurial journey, and really just in this last year, I've learned that my impulsivity and my ability to be in the present is actually a gift. Right. And because I'm an entrepreneur, I can create a business that supports my ability or my impulsivity, or my ability to be in the present, and that it actually, it's a strength. It's not just that I'm ADHD and I needed medicine, or you can't do things this way, or you're messy. It's like, actually your ability is to meet people where they are. And so we just need to create we need to put you, match you with the need with your skills. Yeah. Right. And so the teachers aren't willing to see Sterling as having a set of skills. Mm-hmm. Everything's just a deficit. Everything's a problem. Yep. Right? Like, no, this system isn't built for him. Yep. Yep. He'll find his way. Like, he's got to go through this process, but he's going to find his way, and he's going to bloom when he's like, oh, I need to run 5 miles before I go to work, or whatever the things are that he's going to do. Or I need to be at a place where I'm talking to people and engaging with people all day long. Yep. So I feel like if we can draw on people's strengths and match the need of the company with people's strengths, I think that's a beautiful way to decolonize work. That was a very long answer.
Now, I love this thing about the way, I know you were saying a lot of things, but the thing I'm hearing the most is the way the educational system is preparing people for the workplace, right? So work needs to be decolonized. The educational system is preparing you for this work. That's a particular way. And so right now, Sterling is being penalized for not being the way, because he needs to be shaped for the work. One of the conversations I had in this series, my guest said she finally realized that her mother understood the assignment. There was so much anger that she had against her mother around a bunch of stuff, but it was really, mom was preparing her for a certain kind of work and was doing her best to make sure she could fit in this environment. Yeah. And so part of this has to be acknowledging that the system works. The system works because it's preparing us for the workplace, and that workplace is set up the way that it's set up. So I wonder how would, you have, your definition has, do you say freedom? It's healing the ways that we know.
Healing the ruptures created by dominant culture. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so tell me, repeat your definition, because there was a part of it that felt.
The process of healing the ruptures created by dominant or colonial ways of knowing and being.
Knowing and being, right.
Yeah. It's a return to the old ways.
Yeah. So then there's this thing about knowledge, and we know in one particular way. How is that showing up in the workplace? Because I think it's definitely showing up in terms of the processes that we have for getting stuff done. This is the way to do it. But knowing and being, how do you see that we're showing up in the workplace, and what would need to be tweaked?
I'm actually thinking about my last employment situation, which was interesting, to say the least. I don't know that this is a widespread experience, but I think people lie. And I think I think they lie.
Right. I think people do lie.
I think they're not honest about what their true agenda is and what their abilities to achieve that agenda actually are. And I think that creates a lot of problems. And this may be very specific to my particular experience, but I think people lie. And I think that it's again, and it's probably back down to the schooling and the preparation for the workplace. Like, well, they've developed coping mechanisms. I didn't know that I thought this until right now.
Tell me. So I love it.
No, it's a coping mechanism. So I'm gonna basically front and say that I can do these things, or say that, or at least I can figure out these things, right? But really, I have this other agenda happening that I'm going to sort of work underneath while I'm presenting whatever front to you. And I think it creates a disconnect and a distortion. And then the overarching goals don't get met because people aren't telling the truth.
So what's an example of this?
I'm trying
without outing those people. We're not gonna
Yeah, give me a minute. It's a good thing you can edit this. You can edit this out. I think, okay, this is not necessarily from the job I was at, but I think people lie on the resumes, right? Because they're trying, I think people don't understand that job descriptions are aspirational. And, like the perfect person would have all of these things.
Right.
We don't actually expect that we're going to get the perfect person, but people try to then be the perfect person. And they say, oh, well, I'm just going to fudge here and stretch there and lie. There's lying, and as a result, they get into a position where the expectations are such, but they can't reach them. And that creates problems, right? And then on this side, I'm making it too complicated. That's where I'm at. The school system, the education system is basically homogenizing people.
Yeah.
Right. And they're polishing away innovation and talent and new perspective because people are trying to fit into a box.
Creating clones.
Yeah.
Clones and robots. And one of the things that I've realized that it takes a lot of courage, and I think this is probably where it comes to the self-decolonization, because to be in the system that is basically saying everybody looks this way, everybody acts this way. I remember when my boss told me, Faith, you don't have to take your full lunch break. Yeah. So there's a way that upwardly mobile professionals look. And you weren't looking that way when you take the whole lunch break. She didn't say all of that, but that was kind of part of the message to me. And so as we do this kind of thing, the whole personal decolonization is, I think, the biggest part of this work, because I have to be willing to see myself for my full self versus for the clone that I have thought that I should fit into. I should be this kind of way. And whether it's I should be quiet or loud, depending on the category that I'm trying to align myself with. Because I realized that if I wanted to fit into the typical, what felt like to me, the typical Black professional category, I needed to speak a certain way, look a certain way, and have a certain cadence to my voice. And I was like, ooh, that wasn't me. And it felt disloyal way, but that's the Black way. But even this notion that there is a Black way or there is any particular way is part of the colonizing framework, because it is about these categories that are so reductive. And so I think it does definitely start with some personal work in terms of decolonization. All right, so I know that we don't have a lot of time. So what's stirring for you in terms of your own curiosity? Like you're going to be, as an entrepreneur, expanding yourself into, a fleet of workers, not fleet, but you're gonna
a fleet. We need a fleet. We need
a whole.
Yeah.
So what's a curiosity for you in terms of you being a person that is inviting people into restorative work?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that actually terrifies me. And it's not so much the invitation into the restorative work. It's an acknowledgement of my own limitations around training and being explicit and super clear about what I need in a team.
Yeah.
So that's definitely a growing edge for me. I have many conversations. I don't know if you talked to Inika about this, but I've had many conversations with Inika about this. And again, it's probably down to my impulsivity and my particular personality. Like, I don't have the patience to train people. I'm clear that it needs to happen. And so I'll probably need to hire someone to train the people, And I'm also clear that I want the kind of environment that is mutually supportive. I'm at the beginning of this journey, but mutually supportive, where everyone's ideas can be heard and considered.
Right.
I'm still really confused about, or not clear about how things move forward when you don't actually have a hierarchy, right? When there's a circle and there's no hierarchy.
Right.
How do you need people who are going to step forward. Like, everyone has to understand, like, in order for the circle to work, people have to take on responsibilities. And I'm not always convinced that happens. So I think you need like very special people and very clear set of sort of rules of engagement, like how we're going to actually work inside of this circle if we're not going to have a hierarchy. But again, that's my own colonial training. Like,
right.
I'm the most colonized. That's my big joke, is that my academic training made me the most colonized. But I know in healing processes, I have seen circles work.
Right.
In a workplace that's not necessarily focused on healing, I'm not sure how it works. I'm not saying it can't, I'm just not sure.
But I think you've stumbled onto a clue there, because you said in a workplace that's not necessarily focused on healing, I'm not sure how that works. That there's a hint there that maybe the workplace could be focused on healing. And if that becomes the focus, because see, I think what happens is that we have these models that, we're looking at this is how work looks. And like, I wonder, is there anybody that says that the workplace can't be focused on healing? And if that's the case, what does it mean to hold human healing and restoration alongside innovative support for clients in whatever way that we do it? And what's the both and for that? But I love the fact that there's a part of this that's acknowledging my individuality, having decided that that's not the corporate way, that doesn't work for the corporate way. But then I don't have methods for supporting, equipping people that's not the corporate way and that fits my individuality. And I think that's a gap a lot of people are in. So we end up with the revolving door, because we're like, okay, I invite people in, oops, and then they leave, and then I invite people in and they leave. And then you're also saying, how do we, like, what's decision-making look like? And what, if we're not going to dictate, then what's decision-making look like? What's this shared responsibility look like?
Yeah, I think that's a really, the first time I heard that term, like, how are we going to make decisions, and how are we going to end? That's the other thing. I think you need, and this I learned from healing groups, but also from more collaborating with folks. I think there needs to be an agreement in the beginning about how you intend to end. Right. And if that means either close the project or close the work or let someone go, like, I think all of those things, it's almost like you need a prenup about how it's going to, transition out.
And then opportunities to update that as you go. I do believe, and I'm not going to answer all the questions though, because we'll take our conversation offline. But I do believe that rituals of connection provide us with opportunities to come up with our agreements, and then rituals of closing. And so there are these cycles of start and stop, whether that's a day or a project or a cycle of some kind, that gives us the opportunity to say, okay, did we do what we said? Did we do it how we said it? And then how do we learn from this cycle to do it again? And I think that the static nature of the organization right now just doesn't have that fluidity and that kind of responsiveness built in. And of course, it can't be inclusive if it's not responsive, because people constantly change and the organization constantly changes people. So building these cycles of we agree and then we reflect on what we agreed, and then we agree and we reflect on what we agreed, feel critical to this new style of doing things. I think.
Go on.
No, go. Tell me.
What strikes me as you're talking, and we talked about like maybe the lessons from healing work, is I think part of the disconnect is the speed at which corporations work, that corporate works, and healing takes the time it takes. Right. And so in terms of that, like, how do you hold the both and? I think it actually might sit in decolonizing time. Right. I don't know how you, again, conflict, like, how do you slow things down when you have deadlines to meet, right? So everything is connected to something else. Right.
There is definitely the rejiggering of the notion of time, because it's not just slow things down. Sometimes it speed things up. Like I've seen like things look like they happen overnight, and we are really committed to a cadence that's predetermined by us versus being responsive to what's showing up in the community, whether that's a longer time or, I mean, my son wrote a sentence out of nowhere when he was 17. And it was a sentence that said, it started with the word assume, and I didn't even know he knew his letters. So there is this notion of things are happening, but we think the way things are look when they're happening, we've described what these outcomes should look like. And I think when we decolonize work, then we also are decolonizing, like you're saying, our ways of knowing. And then we're more flexible to, of course, building in greater ways of knowing, but also there's stuff that's going to show up that you didn't know was going to show up. So how can we build our capacity to be responsive to that as we go? So there was one last thing I was going to say, and then we're wrapping up. We're going to just turn off Facebook Live and we'll keep talking. That sometimes we're going to just have to, I don't know, sometimes it's just a holding of the space with each other. I've seen this with my artist actor friends. Like they get together and just don't know things. And a friend of mine said to me, they just sit down and wait on the it. There's a thing that the group in this moment of not knowing will decide to do that evolves from the not knowing. And within 15 minutes, they all know what it is, and then they do it. And it was an improv practice exercise. But as I watched it happen a few times, I'm like, it's so interesting that humans get together and form in sync with each other when we kind of allow ourselves to, and then move towards a goal. And I wonder, back to ancient ways, if we can allow ourselves to know that when we are in agreement on the thing, that we will move towards the communal it. And when we find ourselves not moving towards the communal it, what's that? What's the guidance there? What's the message? What's the thing for us in terms of shaping our movement, right? When we find that we can't move towards it. So on that obscure, unclear, but mysterious note,
I think this is old ways. You just call it's beginner's mind. It's the willingness to not know.
Yeah.
It's not obscure at all.
Well, let's not know, and yet let's be on the journey together.
Indeed, I appreciate it.
All right, let's go. We're done. How do I end a live though?
Where it says live on Facebook, click, there you go. It's still recording. I still don't see you. It's still not on your page for me.